Prelude. Not gonna lie. I don't like this, Stan, said Niket, her voice muffled slightly by the reinforced helmet covering her face. She adjusted the visor and glanced warily around the tunnel, her stocky frame bundled in thick, fur-like clothing under a patched-up set of bonded leather armor. The armor looked like it had been cobbled together from scraps, each piece sewn with the kind of rough efficiency that spoke to years of scavenging and survival. "I heard you the first 7 times, Nick," Stanley snapped back, his patience already wearing thin. He was much taller than Niket, but built just as solidly, his armor bearing the same patchwork aesthetic. His helmet visor glinted faintly in the beam of his torch as he turned to glance back at her. "You're welcome to head back to camp, but you'll be doing it on your own." Niket hesitated, glancing down the dark tunnel ahead. Dirt crumbled faintly from the ceiling, sprinkling onto her shoulders. "Where would you rather be right now?" Stanley continued, his tone a mix of sarcasm and exasperation. "Down here in the actual dirt, or topside with the bugs, slugs, and sand?" "Yeah, I guess so," Niket replied reluctantly, her shoulders sagging. "Still doesn't change the fact it's scary as hell down here, Stan," she spat, her voice rising slightly. The two were deep in the underground burrows, an immense network of almost perfectly circular tunnels. The walls were compacted dirt, still moist in some places, but surprisingly sturdy. Their high-beamed torches illuminated the way, thick white light cutting through the oppressive darkness ahead. "We probably should have waited for the rest of the prospectors, though," Niket muttered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Stanley stopped in his tracks and turned to face her, his expression hard. He wasn't particularly attractive, but his features carried a rugged charm. "And risk losing out on what's there? I think the Union sees enough of our profits, don't you?" he snapped. Niket shrugged and nodded, but still looked uneasy. "But why do we have to come to an active hive?" she asked, her constant questions beginning to wear on Stanley. "I told you before," he snapped again, his voice sharper now. "Because when a hive is abandoned, the black stone breaks down until it's no more than the sands were plagued with topside." He paused, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "Well, that, and the shit that moves into these hives once the bugs abandon them. This seems just as dangerous," Niket mumbled, her gaze fixed on her feet as she carefully placed each step. "We're probably safer down here at night than we are up there," Stanley shot back. His voice echoed slightly, the sound bouncing through the endless tunnels. Stanley glanced down at the nurse's watch strapped to his bonded leather harness. The glow-in-the-dark hands showed they still had 7 hours until sunrise. "Plenty of time to get in and out," he said confidently, his tone firm. The pair continued through the maze of tunnels, the paths branching off into a labyrinth of interconnected passageways. The further they went, the more the walls began to shimmer faintly under the torchlight, as if hinting at something just ahead. Finally, they reached an opening that Stan figured was a vast cavern, though the light from their torches was being swallowed by the sheer size of the space. "How will we know when we're there?" Niket asked, her voice filled with apprehension as she clung close behind Stanley. Stanley chuckled, his tone softening slightly. "This is how," he said, flipping a switch on his torch. The beam changed from stark white to a vivid purple, bathing the walls in ultraviolet light. Niket gasped audibly. "Whoa," she breathed, her attention fixated on the walls. The dirt tunnels now revealed their true nature, translucent, scaly glass that glowed and crackled underfoot. The walls came alive with the photochemical reaction, casting a mesmerizing purple light show in response to the UV beam. "It's beautiful," Niket whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from the sight. "And just a handful of these will get us all the way to the upper city," Stanley said, his voice filled with excitement. "No more undercity for us." He moved closer to the glowing wall, scanning it with the UV light. As he traced the beam along the surface, the glass cracked into distinct, scale-shaped pieces while remaining firmly in place. Stanley pulled a small hammer and chisel from his harness and got to work. With careful strikes, he dislodged several of the scales, each piece falling to the ground with a satisfying clink. Despite their fragility, the scales remained intact as they landed. Niket crouched to pick one up, holding it up to the UV light. The scale refracted the purple glow into a dazzling array of colors, its beauty almost otherworldly. "Worth it, right?" Stanley said with a grin, pausing to wipe the sweat from his brow. Niket smiled faintly, though a lingering unease tugged at her thoughts. "Yeah, worth it," she replied softly, though her eyes flicked nervously to the dark cavern beyond. Unbeknownst to them, deeper within the cavern, something stirred. Niket watched Stanley's technique closely, mimicking his steady movements as best she could. Pulling out her own small hammer and chisel, she began tapping lightly into the cracks illuminated by her UV torch. The first few scales of black glass fell with a faint plink onto the blackened floor. With each success, her confidence grew, and she chipped away at the fractured glass with more precision. As they worked, they used their torch's UV functions to locate the fallen shards on the ground, their faint glow against the dirt making them easy to spot. Piece by piece, they gathered the scales into their satchels before moving to a new section of the wall. The rhythm of their chiseling filled the air, each sharp ting echoing endlessly through the glass-lined tunnels. But the echoing sounds weren't reassuring to Niket. With every tiny noise reverberating into the darkness, her anxiety grew. She tightened her grip on her tools, her eyes darting nervously around the edges of the cavern. "Are you sure we're alone in here?" Niket asked, her voice trembling slightly. Stanley chuckled, barely looking up from his work. "Ask yourself this. If you couldn't go out during the day because the sun would roast you like a turkey, would you stay in at night too? We're talking about bloody monsters. Not Sunday walks with your granddad?" She snapped back, her frustration thinly veiling her fear. Stanley smirked, puffing out his chest a little. "And yet, here I am. Still breathing." At that moment, a faint rattling sound echoed through the burrow. It was distant but distinct, like the warning of a rattlesnake. Niket froze, her hammer held midair. "Stanley, did you hear that?" she whispered, her tone sharp with panic. Stanley shrugged dismissively. "Heard what?" That rattling," Niket stammered, her torchlight sweeping across the cavern in frantic, jerky movements. Stanley waved her off. "Relax, it's just your imagination being a dick. Happens down here." But Niket wasn't convinced. She stepped out into the larger part of the cavern, her breathing quickening as her torchlight struggled to penetrate the black glass walls. The rattling came again, closer this time, and Niket spun in place, her head whipping around to match the frantic motion of her torch. "Stanley, can we please leave now? I don't want to be here anymore," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Stanley sighed, glancing at his nearly full bag of blackstone. "Sure, we've got enough. We should probably get going anyway," he replied casually, starting toward her. He only took a few steps before he froze. His face went pale, his jaw slack beneath the visor of his helmet. Behind Niket, something was moving. Emerging from the darkness were 6 bright red legs, impossibly spindly yet terrifyingly strong. Each limb was twice the length of Niket, unfolding silently from the shadows like a grotesque blooming flower. Niket stood frozen in place, her body paralyzed with fear. She could feel the presence behind her, but the weight of terror rooted her feet to the ground. "Nicey, baby," Stanley whispered, his voice trembling but urgent. "Walk toward me, right now." Niket's wide eyes locked onto Stanley's, tears welling as she shook her head frantically. I can't," she choked out. The legs continued to unfold, their thick, vibrant red glowing faintly even in the darkness. They stretched around Niket like the arms of a predator claiming its prey. "Baby, please, come to me," Stanley begged, his voice breaking. Niket tried to step forward, but as her foot moved, she saw the monstrous legs curling around her, cutting off her escape. Before she could scream, Stanley rushed in just as the limbs struck, pushing Niket out of the way. In the blink of an eye, they wrapped around him tightly, pulling him into the abyss with a horrifying speed. His scream echoed through the cavern, harrowing and desperate, before being cut off abruptly as the legs disappeared into the blackness. His satchel fell to the floor with a thud, blackstone falling out onto the floor. Niket let out a deep, gut-wrenching cry, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Her torch trembled in her hand as her gaze darted wildly into the darkness, searching for any sign of Stanley. For a few agonizing seconds, silence reigned. Niket stood there, trembling, her mind racing. Then the stillness shattered. A horrifying hiss reverberated through the cavern, followed by a blinding flash of golden light that bathed the walls in a radiant glow. The flash was accompanied by a deafening, low-pitched buzz and a gust of wind so powerful it nearly knocked Niket off her feet. The golden light receded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Niket alone in the suffocating darkness. Completely bewildered by the flashing golden light, Niket stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. Panic surged through her as she lost her balance and crashed onto the dirt floor. Her torch slipped from her hand, clattering to the ground, but she didn't stop to retrieve it. Scrambling to her feet, she turned and ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she sprinted blindly through the dark tunnel. Behind her, enormous red, spindly legs reached into the narrow passageway, scraping against the walls as they grasped for her. Whatever those legs were attached to was far too massive to fit into the tunnel, but the sheer force of their motion sent waves of dirt and debris raining down around Niket. Flashes of golden light illuminated the tunnel sporadically, each burst accompanied by an angry, bone-chilling hiss. The light was disorienting, and Niket could feel the vibrations of the creature's movement behind her, each hiss rattling her very core. "Go, go, go," she muttered to herself, her voice trembling with desperation. Niket didn't know if she was heading the right way. She didn't care. All that mattered was getting away. She ran with everything she had, her lungs burning and her legs threatening to give out. The uneven floor beneath her felt like it was shifting, and suddenly, the ground gave way entirely. Niket let out a guttural scream as she plummeted into a rocky cavern below. She hit the dirt and stone floor with a sickening thud, the impact knocking the wind out of her. Pain radiated through her body as she lay there, gasping for air. Her helmet rolled away into the darkness, and she felt warm blood trickling down her body, soaking into her clothes. Get up," she pleaded with herself, her voice shaking. Her arms ached as she pushed herself upright, staggering to her feet. The cavern was pitch black, the golden flashes now gone, leaving her utterly blind. Niket reached out, her hands fumbling for anything to guide her. Her fingers found the sharp, stony wall, and she began to limp along its edge, her breath hitching with each agonizing step. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint sound of her boots scraping against the dirt. But then, a noise pierced the darkness. A deep, guttural croak, thick and wet, like a toad's wail amplified 100-fold but lodged in a throat it wasn't supposed to be inside of. Niket froze. Oh God, please no," she whimpered, her voice barely audible. "Please, I can't." Another croak echoed, this one closer, coming from directly behind her. Niket screamed, her terror erupting like a dam breaking. She bolted in the opposite direction, her own cries joining the cacophony of croaks and wails that now filled the cavern. The sound was deafening, coming from all around her, as if the walls themselves were alive. Dozens, no, hundreds, of croaking voices wailed in unison, their pitches varying wildly. Niket's panicked mind raced, the sheer number of creatures closing in on her overwhelming her thoughts. She stumbled through the darkness, her frantic pace sending her careening into a wall. The sharp impact cracked against her skull, and she fell backward onto the ground, clutching her head. Her vision blurred, pain radiating through her body as she rolled on the dirt floor. Whimpering, she muttered a panicked mix of prayers and apologies. "Stanley, I'm sorry." "Oh gods, I'm so sorry." The croaks grew louder, closer. Niket forced herself to her feet, wobbling as she staggered forward. Her ears rang from the noise, her heart pounding like a drum. Then suddenly, the croaks stopped. The cavern fell into an eerie, oppressive silence, broken only by Niket's shallow, ragged breaths. She stumbled forward, her trembling hands searching for the wall, but before she could take another step, something cold and slimy gripped her arm. Niket froze, her body locking in place as the hand yanked her backward with terrifying strength. She fell hard onto the floor, the breath knocked out of her. "Get off me!" she screamed, struggling against the grip. But the hand tightened, and then she felt it, the searing heat. The burning sensation spread rapidly, and Niket's fur-lined sleeve disintegrated under the grip, the acidic touch eating away at her flesh. She let out a god's-forsaken scream, the sound stretching her vocal cords to their limit. Another hand emerged from the darkness, this one gripping her head. Niket could feel the icy, slimy fingers digging into her skin, the ridged thumb pressing against her forehead. The burning was immediate and unbearable, her flesh melting beneath the hand's touch. Her screams turned into shallow, choking gargles as her body convulsed. Thick black sludge oozed from the creature's grip, covering her as the burning sensation consumed her entirely. The last sound Niket heard was the deafening chorus of croaks and wails echoing through the cavern, drowning out her cries as she was pulled apart into the suffocating darkness. Black Sandz, the darkest night. Believe in yourself, otherwise no one else will.